So my name is Claudia Kiefer. I'm a recent transplant to Atlanta. I'm from New York, and I have spent my life working as a designer. I have my own company where I make sparkly clothes for people on stage, evening wear. But in my mind, it's always for someone on stage, because that was my background in New York, in production and in the entertainment industry. For me, it was always so much fun, because when I was a little girl, I started doing stuff on stage. I think the first thing I was in was like second grade. The excitement that you feel being on a stage before the curtain opens, and you're standing there in your costume, and you can hear the orchestra down in the pit, and you're standing there waiting for the curtain to go up and the music to start, and you're going to do your song, and that feeling of excitement, that was what made it fun for me. The circumstances around my growing up, it was difficult because I was this very sensitive little girl, and my family was not a healthy one. And then as I got older, that turned into like a mild form of depression. I always had this kind of heaviness that kind of came with the lightness of who I was. There was always this kind of other thing hovering kind of in the background. And I think my depression really kind of came into full measure in my 20s, because that's also when I started to self-medicate. So there was drinking and there was drugs. And so, the first thing your doctor says is, let's try an SSRI. And those never helped me. When I was in my mid-40s, I had breast cancer. And for me, I decided full-on mastectomy. I was trying to count how many surgeries I had, and I think I had like 9 surgeries in the period of like 4 years. At that point in my life, they could give me morphine, and it didn't work on me anymore because I was so used to these drugs. The nurse was next to me, and he was checking on my pain, and he'd given me morphine, and he says, how's your pain? And I said, it's still not touching it. Like, this is still burning down here. And so the anesthesiologist came to the doorway, and she asked how I was doing. And I heard her say, and I'll never forget it, I heard her say, give her 20 milligrams of ketamine. I didn't know what ketamine was. So he gave me the drug, and about 10 minutes later, my brain, it just felt like nothing I had ever felt before. All the years of self-medicating, all the years of doing whatever I could to feel better, all the years of antidepressants, all the years of everything. And it felt like my brain had a spring cleaning, like it just got washed clean. And it was so profound. And I remember thinking, I've got to figure out what this ketamine thing is, because hadn't felt that way that I could remember in so long. So kind of fast forward, I'm now living at my mom's house. I had gone through a huge messy divorce right after that surgery. And I ended up having a nervous breakdown there. And by the time I got to my mom's, my brain just kind of broke. Back then, this was in 2013 maybe, you'd Google ketamine and you'd get all the way down to the bottom of the page. I saw this study at the NIH. The NIH was doing a research protocol on treatment-resistant depression, and they were using ketamine as a trial drug to see if it worked. So I made the phone call, and after this long intake interview process over the phone, they said, no, check back in a year, and maybe the protocol standards will have changed. I waited a year, and it was a really hard year. That was the year that I thought about suicide. Because you get to this place where the struggle in here gets to be so much, and you have people that love you, and you have people that care about you, and you have a life. I have a son. I had a mother who loved me, but I just couldn't walk around with this in my head anymore. I clung to that. because I had nothing else. It was either figure out a plan to end my life or hang on long enough to participate in a research protocol at the National Institutes for Mental Health, to participate in a trial for a drug for treatment-resistant depression that I had already been given and that I knew had done something that made my brain feel different in here. That was a really hard year because I had this sliver of hope. Ketamine is different. You feel like your brain has been washed clean of all the junk that gets built up inside. And so I waited a year, I called them back, and I got in. So that year in between getting it post-op and hearing from the NIH that I was accepted into their study, it was just every day waking up and just minute by minute, not even day by day, minute by minute. How can I get through the next minute without wanting to go into the garage? And so the NIH flew me down to Bethesda. I lived on campus for about 4 months. And you have to go through this process where they titrate you off of any drugs that you're on. And I was on a bunch of different antidepressants and, different things. And then you do the infusion, and it was just like I remembered it from the post-surgery event. And I was just so relieved to know that they were doing research on something that I knew. I had already known it. Like, I already knew that this thing made my brain feel better. It was like a new chance at life for me, because I knew if they're testing this drug for this purpose, there's hope for someone like me, because that means at some point I will see this drug become available to someone like me, because I knew that the way my brain felt afterwards was different than an antidepressant. All the antidepressants that I had been on while I was self-medicating, while I was struggling through life, while I was trying to feel better, I knew that there was this one thing, that one day after my breast cancer surgery that they gave me that made my brain feel like a healthy brain. So I was there for 4 months, and I was like one of their success stories. When I looked at the list of drugs that I had been on from doctors, like every single one of them, I had electroshock treatments. I had everything, you name it, under the sun, 45 years of therapy. It wasn't touching what was happening inside my brain. It wasn't until I had gotten the ketamine that I felt some sort of relief. And 10 years out, I'm able to experience joy. I'm able to see a future. The joy that I have with my granddaughter now is not something that I could have anticipated back then. I would not have had that if I had taken a different route 10 years ago. There's a lightness in my life now that I didn't have before I discovered this.